This is Hashtag Gen Z, a podcast that explores Generation Z, who they are, how they're different from other generations, while also being an incredible blend of those who came before them. We explore what they think is cool, what moves them, and why they do what they do. I'm your host, Megan Grace. When we first start our careers, we're often thinking about what's immediately ahead, what we'll wear to work on the first day, the connections we might make, or the skills we might pick up along the way. Most people are not thinking about retirement in their 20s, but as we've pointed out over the last few years, Gen Z isn't made up of your typical young adults in their 20s, or at least as we've known typical 20-somethings in past generations. As we've explored in our latest book, Generations in the World of Work, Gen Z is taking retirement seriously and starting preparation earlier. Not just the financial aspects of retirement preparation, but the mindset preparation about the role of work in our lives. And who better to learn about the mindset around retirement than from older adults who are navigating or have navigated retirement preparation? What if retirement, though, wasn't the end of your working life, but simply the start of a new chapter? Recent research from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics shows the fastest growing segment in the workforce isn't young professionals or mid career climbers. It's actually adults over the age of 75. In fact, by 2034, nearly 1 in 10 Americans aged 75 or older are projected to still be working. And not just working in quiet, low stress jobs. We're talking about being CEOs, construction workers, truck drivers, real estate moguls, you name it. Even 80-year-olds in leadership roles, long after the typical retirement age of 65. This trend we're seeing is driven both by necessity and choice. Some work to supplement income and retirement savings, but others are working for purpose, community, and mental stimulation that work brings. And for younger generations, including Gen Z, this raises big questions. How do we think about retirement differently? And how do we prepare our future without missing out on life now? To help us explore this, I'm joined by Noah Sheidlower, an economy reporter with Business Insider. Noah focuses on retirement, aging, and the changing workplace, and he's currently in the midst of a year-long series spotlighting people working well into their 80s and 90s. Noah is a graduate of Columbia University and brings both an investigative lens and a deep curiosity about the ways generations intersect at work and life. And at just 24, he's already interviewed hundreds of older Americans, uncovering both economic realities and human stories that challenge how we think about aging, purpose, and success. So let's dig into what older generations can teach us about purpose, money, and living life on our own timeline, and what Gen Z can learn specifically about how to shape their future by living now.
This is William Tincup, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Indeed FutureWorks. Ryan and I attended the conference last year, and we created a limited series for Indeed where we talked to their customers. Great stories around TA and how they use Indeed to the max. So check it out. It's just Indeed FutureWorks 2024. You can search for it wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks.
I'm really excited, as I always am, to welcome a new guest and a new friend to today's conversation. I really do love that when people come across my universe through recommendations. I tend to trust it a little bit more, and that's definitely our guest today. Our guest today, actually, we were introduced by a former guest, Sharon, who came and talked to us about gerontology and the science of aging. And today I'm talking with Noah. Noah, it's so good to have you here. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, I'm so excited. I know when Sharon got us connected, she started sharing your work. I said, I feel like I got to talk to Noah. There's just probably so much knowledge that you're collecting in the work you're doing. And let's get into that. So tell me a little bit about your story. Who are you and what are you currently doing? And what was the journey of getting here? We'll get into like what you're really finding in some of your research, but give us a little bit of the backstory of Noah.
So, I am an economy reporter at Business Insider, and I am 2 years out of undergrad. I went to Columbia University for my undergraduate degree, and then literally within 2 weeks, I was at Business Insider. I have been really interested my whole life in how people interact with each other. And I was a sociology major in college, so I was always really interested in how do the older generations interact with the younger generations? How should somebody who's a lot younger talk to their older relatives? how should they in the workplace, because I know that there's always a little bit of a, whether it's outward hostility or just not fully understanding differences in age, there's always going to be a little bit of tension, and I've always been fascinated by that. Of okay, well, I am 20, 21, 22 years old doing these internships, working with people in their 50s and 60s. How am I supposed to approach this professional relationship? So about a year-ish ago, I made a transition to covering retirement. We saw that these stories were doing super well for us. We also found that it was a very under-asked and underappreciated part of the media sphere. And we were noticing that the stories were really taking off, and we were not expecting that. People would write us and say, there's nothing out there about my generation. I don't read about people in their 70s. I don't read about people in their 80s. But I feel like we have 7, 8 decades of life experience that we should be imparting on people. So we noticed that this was a beat that was obviously profitable from a corporate standpoint, but also tapping into a niche that nobody had really covered to the extent that I wanted it to be covered. I really wanted to be out on the front lines and speaking with people, traveling, visiting families, talking to folks who are still working later in life. And that's ultimately what I have tried to do over the last year or so. Obviously, I am 24 years old, so there's only so much life knowledge that I have, but it's been very fascinating to have people who are in their 80s and their 90s trust me with their life stories.
I really, I don't know if you get this a lot, but I just get like you have old soul energy. And I wonder if that just comes from who you've been hanging out with lately as you're just like absorbing this wisdom from older generations. But I too love to learn from older generations. I love to learn from all generations. So I'm really excited to be able to talk to you about what you've been learning from these older people. And as you were telling me your story when you were like, yeah, it was sociology and I ended up in econ, or in the like economics field of reporting, I was like, interesting. And then I realized and remembered that economics is just the study of human behavior and decisions. So you didn't go that far from your sociology degree. And it's cool to see how your studies are probably helping inform how you're reporting. So I'm fascinated by this. I'm fascinated by your job. I'm fascinated by the work you've been doing. You've spent the last year talking to people in their 70s or 80s and their 90s who are still working. What drew you to this besides the fact that you weren't really seeing a lot of coverage of people in this demographic, but there is an important story to be told? And really, how is your work with this kind of group of people changed the way that you're viewing aging or even working?
So this sparked honestly from going into a Home Depot one day, looking around. I was with a friend. He needed to get something from a Home Depot. And a lot of the employees were a lot older than I guess I had ever thought about. It seems like everyone at the cash registers, a lot of the people who were helping out customers, I would say, were 60, 70, 80. And I was always puzzled by that of, okay, well, why are there so many people who are this old that are working in these jobs that are likely not paying a ton of money? Oh, from doing a lot of this reporting, I know that a lot of these positions, whether it's Home Depot or a grocery store or another big box retailer, they're paying $15, $20 an hour, maybe 25 if you're lucky. And there's kind of this trope of the Walmart greeter of this is what our old people do, is work at a store like this to supplement their extra social security money or their savings that tend to be dwindling with the people that I speak with. So this I felt was a demographic that had not obviously received a lot of media attention, but it was also very fascinating of how did they end up there? I recently spoke with a woman who works at Trader Joe's, and she had a really interesting perspective on this, where she said, everybody here has a story that you wouldn't be able to tell just from looking at us. And she is 81, working at a Trader Joe's, and she's building a company on the side. She said that one of her coworkers is in a band. One of her coworkers does comedy shows on the side, and it's fascinating that you wouldn't necessarily know that just by looking at these folks. So that's what inspired the initial impetus for the series. Then we started digging into the data a couple of months ago based on some census data and Bureau of Labor Statistics data, and we were able to deduct that among the 80 plus demographic, and also if you generalize it downwards to 75 plus, 65 plus, this is where the growth in the job market is coming from, at least from a labor participation rate standpoint. So every year, pretty much, we are seeing an uptick in the percentage of each age group that is still working. So we thought, okay, this is a trend. This is something that is going to compound with time. You were seeing that as many as 10% of people 75 and older are projected to be in the workforce in about a decade. 10% that are 75 and older who are still going to be working, which is mind blowing to me. And I think it's mind blowing to a lot of our readers. So as we built out the series, we've noticed that there are a lot of people who are working in jobs that I was not expecting. Construction, for example, is one of the most populous of professions, which is not something that you would ever expect 80-year-olds to be doing, is working in construction. And a lot of them are laborers. They're not just the people behind the desk. We saw truck drivers. We were seeing obviously retail, but also a lot of positions of leadership, people who are CEOs, managers, real estate moguls. We were seeing kind of everything. So we just wanted to tap into this much more than I think anybody ever has.
I think it's one, you shouted out two of my favorite places to go: the hardware store, because we're homeowners and something's always breaking, and Trader Joe's. And those people are so helpful. So I'm not surprised, because what we know, I mean, our girl Sharon told us that like healthy social aging is about having purpose. And sometimes just that sense of purpose, I have to imagine, of showing up to a job where you're going to help people, whether it's find their cauliflower gnocchi at Trader Joe's, or finding that tool that they might need to finish the project at their home. But I mean, you identified that these are common jobs, but it's not just these kind of like very part-time, when you feel like it kind of jobs that older adults are flocking to. They still want that sense of purpose, whatever that looks like, or they're creating something else, and they're using the Trader Joe's money to, as you've identified, supplement their income. As you've been learning more from this population, how has it helped reshape your outlook on aging or on work?
So one of the major takeaways for me is that there's no perfect retirement. There's no there's no gold standard of doing life correctly. And I think that as somebody in the Gen Z sphere who has been taught that, okay, well, you need to retire at 65, otherwise, what's the point? Or you need to be retired at 50. What's the point of even waiting until 65? Just get a lot of money, work in a lot of high paying jobs, and retire at 50 and do whatever you want for the rest of your life. That has been a very fascinating change in how I perceive aging. And I think that there's a lot of talk right now, especially among the experts that I speak with, who are trying to even get rid of generational labels, who are trying to get rid of this idea of a retirement age as a guiding principle. We have done a lot of speaking with folks who say, you were going to carry me out of that office in a coffin. And it's been really fascinating to see that people just don't want the typical sense of retirement anymore. I don't know exactly what that could be attributed to. There's a lot of different factors at play that people have told me about. One is just the fact that as we have shifted as a country away from pensions, more toward relying on Social Security and your 401k, There's been a little bit more hesitancy to retire just because people are not as financially equipped as they might have been if they had relied on a pension. We have noticed that a lot of the people that we speak with are very economically vulnerable. And this was also something that I don't think a lot of people realize, is the fact that you can be 85 and have nothing to your name and not have your kids supporting you. And what other options you have. Either you rely on your 1,500 a month check in Social Security and pray that you can afford all your bills, or you're healthy enough to keep working. So that's on the more negative front. On the more positive front, we have spoken with a lot of people who say it keeps me active, it keeps my brain going, I'm able to set my own hours. One of the fascinating things that we noticed was the percentage of people who are self-employed into their 80s and their 90s, meaning that they operate businesses or work their own hours or do gig work, pretty much matches the overall population's percentage. I believe it's 27 or 28%. So that was another thing where I thought, okay, if you reach your 80s, you're going to want to rely on something that's a little bit easier, something that is more defined in terms of when you're getting your paycheck. But no, a lot of these people still are maintaining that sense of independence. So that was another thing that fascinated me on how a lot of older Americans right now are approaching aging, and I think how Gen Z could start to approach aging.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, you're pointing out that we're shifting our mindsets. Retirement, I think, has been very largely linked to, are you financially prepared? And what I'm hearing is there's also some pieces of it, like there's physical elements of it that if you are still physically active, you just don't want to do like the 9 to 5 grind. You might be wanting to do a slower paced job that's still mentally engaging you in that sense of purpose. And you started to talk about the Gen Z of it all, right? Let's get into the Gen Z of it all. And this kind of feels like retirement's really far away for this generation. But I've weirdly, as we've been doing our research, what we did for our most recent book, found that Gen Z is taking retirement really seriously. What do you see are some of the early signs of this generation, if we're thinking about Gen Z and your peers, and how they're thinking about retirement differently? Are you seeing any choices or habits that are occurring with this younger generation as you kind of compare what's going on today with young people and then those who are bucking the trends of retirement in their 70s and 80s?
So I definitely feel that financial education is a lot better now than it really ever has been. I'm in a couple of Facebook groups about financial independence, retire early, the FIRE movement. I'm seeing a lot of talk right now about quote unquote Henrys, who are high earners, not rich yet. So there's a lot more acronyms, but a lot more resources that are out there for the younger generation. So I talk with a lot of older Americans who tell me I didn't really think to plan for retirement until I hit 40 or until I hit 50. Obviously, I expect that there are some Gen Zers who will get there and realize I have nothing in my bank account when I turn 40 or 50. But I have noticed that there are a lot more people, and I mean, the statistics don't lie. This is a generation that is thinking a lot more about, maybe I should max out my 401k. Maybe I should have a rainy day fund and put it away. I also think that just the diversity of stocks and bonds and all these investment instruments continue to expand. It seems like every day I'm getting an email in my inbox about a new ETF or a new way to invest. And with just the sheer number of apps that are out there that are helping people control their spending or that are managing their portfolios, I definitely think that it's been super easy, whether it's just a click on Robinhood, or a lot of my friends are opening up Vanguard accounts or Schwab accounts. I'm even noticing a lot of people, maybe not exactly my age, but late 20s, early 30s, who are getting financial advisors. I have a financial advisor, or a wealth manager who's managing my money, and it's fascinating that like so many people are getting in on this early. And I think a lot of this stems from the fact that our parents, they're in Gen X, tended to be a little bit more educated than their parents. So I think that definitely there's been this transfer of knowledge that we have been seeing.
Absolutely. And that's in alignment with what we're seeing in the other research that we're doing around Gen Z and retirement. And they're ahead if we like actualize for prior generations being their same age. There's a lot, I think, a lot more resources you've pointed out around the financial education piece of it. But I think there's other elements of, we've got people in their 20s that are already thinking about when they're going to retire. And for some of them, that's a really long way away. Some of them, it's potentially not as far away. But when you think about advice that you've learned from older generations through your research, what are some things that you might suggest beyond the finance aspects of it that might resonate with Gen Z today who are thinking about their future and the ways that they can still get the most out of it, not just from a financial perspective?
I'll start with, I guess, a bit more of a negative note, which is you can't control the future. And this is something that a lot of people kept telling me was, you can plan and something can happen to you and you are not necessarily going to be happy with it. There's kind of the biblical inspired saying of man planned, God laughs, which is something that I heard a lot. It's unfortunate, but you can do everything right and get a diagnosis for a disease, or you can lose your job one day. And this is all things that people have told me. It's not a secret that something can happen to you that you did not anticipate. So one of the things that I have been thinking very heavily about is that you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to do everything right. You don't need to get that one promotion that you've been gunning for that you think will set everything up for you. So that was one thing that a lot of the folks had told me about, which is, I know, a little bit more negative, but is definitely a bit calming to me, at least, of knowing that, okay, I should be thinking about my future, but I also cannot control every aspect of it. And I think that that's a kind of wholesome and calming way to look at the world. A couple of other things that people have told me about is to live life, which might sound very obvious, but I always have, for my entire life, been nervous about spending money because I always thought, okay, I don't know when I'm getting this back. The market could be down one year, and I'm really nervous about that. And I decide, okay, maybe I don't want to take that trip, or maybe I don't really want to go out for that nicer dinner. Obviously, this is a somewhat privileged way of looking at the world, because if you are living paycheck to paycheck, then a lot of these luxuries are not available to you. And that's just a reality that I speak a lot about with people in their 80s who they are living paycheck to paycheck. Living paycheck to paycheck never goes away for some generations. So I'm obviously coming to this point with a bit of privilege, and even acknowledging this. But I think for a lot of folks that I speak with, they said, I waited my whole life until I got to retirement. And once I retired, I realized that I didn't spend enough time with my kids. I didn't take that vacation I wanted to take with my spouse when they were still healthy. Now I retired and my spouse is dealing with a medical condition, or my kids have moved on, or I had something that I can't live out what I want to live out. I spoke with a man last year. This was such a poignant example, who retired at 70 after a very, very successful long career. Within a week, got a cancer diagnosis and was like, what the heck was that all for? And it's just, he told me, I wish I had spent more of my time and more of my money and more of my resources on enjoying life, instead of waiting until I got to a point where I'm 65 and think that once I turn 65 or 70, whatever the retirement age may be, that I'm going to then enjoy life. So this was something that a lot of the people that I speak with tell me. And then just one of the other things is that, I mean, going back to kind of blending money with life and livelihood, doesn't take a ton of effort to, put aside $10, $20 every pay period, and just kind of watch it grow. I think that a lot of the people that I talk to say, why stress yourself out about every little detail in life? Eventually you're going to reach a point where you have a lot of money in the market, and what does it matter if one day it's down, or what does it matter if you want to do something with that money? um, but I think a lot of them were also saying, like, I wish I did those initial steps so that I can get to the point where I did not need to worry, um, as opposed to being a bit of a spendthrift earlier in life. So it is about achieving that balance of having fun, enjoying life, but also not going too overboard to the fact that you're maxing out your credit cards every month.
Absolutely. And I think that you just really summed it up perfectly for me of like what I'm hearing is these older generations have helped you, and what we can kind of reframe for any Gen Z listeners is retirement hopefully will happen one day, but that doesn't mean that you're always preparing for the rainy day, because like I think you might miss the sunny day or the opportunity to have the day in the sun while you're young, and like can enjoy that vacation or that nice meal if it's going to bring you joy in that moment and not threaten your future goals. I appreciate both looks at that of like there's a way to find that balance of enjoying all stages of life. And I appreciate that you've had a front row seat for the economic realities and the financial realities of preparing for retirement, and a lot of the human stories that have come along with it. And that's I think a cool part of your job. What's one thing that you hope that Gen Z that's listening, that they can take away from this as they're navigating their own life and their own path forward in their careers and one day in retirement, whenever that might be for them?
I think the biggest takeaway is to not set deadlines for when you need to achieve life milestones. I have really taken this to heart personally, and I hope that a lot of people take this to heart of, you do not need to be a homeowner by 30. You do not need to be retired at 65. You do not need to have kids at a certain age or have kids, period. So this has been really fascinating for me to, at this point, I think I've spoken to probably over 300 people who are in their 60s through even hundreds. I spoke with somebody who's 101. So just from doing all of these talks, everybody did things at different points in their life. And a lot of them ended up great, and a lot of the people who thought that they would end up great did not, unfortunately. So it's the I think one of the biggest takeaways is to not get your hopes up of, I'm going to do everything perfectly and retire at 60. A lot of the people that I am speaking with in their 80s are happier than a lot of the people I spoke to who had retired at 62. And that's just the reality of it. Obviously, a lot of the people who are retired are loving it, but we hear from so many people who unretire. People who say, I tried out retirement for 2 years. I hated every minute of it. That's just naturally how I am, is I always need to be doing something, and I always need to have something to work toward. So I think that this project is telling a lot of people in Gen Z, is also telling a lot of older people that work is not something to look down upon unless you actually hate it. So a lot of the people that I speak with say, why do we have this stigma against working? Why do we think that, oh, you still work at 80? You must have done something wrong, or you must be crazy to want to keep working at 80. Sure, it's a valid opinion. A lot of people do, they want to dissociate from work after 5 p.m. or at a certain age in life. But I think if you don't hit that certain financial goal that you want to hit by 50 and say, oh my God, I'm screwed, provided that your health keeps up, it's fine. You can keep working, you can navigate, you can be an entrepreneur like a lot of the people that I speak with. There's never a set time that you need to do everything.
I love that point, Noah, because I do think that sometimes when we're in our late teens and our 20s, we have this like view of what we're going to be when we grow up and this timeline we're going to be on. And everyone's like, what's your 5-year plan? And I'm like, I'm just trying to make it past 5 minutes. Right. I think that you've really put this, you chart your own course and your own timeline, and you do what feels right for you. And I really love that you hit on the idea that we have interesting relationships with work. I love what I do. I'm really blessed. I don't like taking a ton of time off because I start to get itchy. Like I get itchy that I'm not doing the thing that I enjoy doing. And I'm just really, really lucky that I get to do that. And I'll do it as long as I'm not happy or until I'm not happy doing it. Right. But my husband always says, he's like, you're not ever going to retire, are you? I said, well, I might not do this forever, but I might get a different job. So we always joke like I'm going to get a different job, but I'm probably going to have some form of a responsibility till the day I die. I could change that mindset, but I just never envision a time when I'm not waking up and doing something with my day. I'm like even bad at vacation. I'm okay at it, but I start to get a little weird after I haven't like had my thing that I've put out there. And I think that also resonates with some of the people that unretire. I will probably unretire multiple times. I tried to be retired for 1 month between jobs and it went miserably. It lasted like a week. But Noah, this has been so fascinating. I really, I plan to dive a little bit deeper into like the financial planning aspect of it in later episodes. But I think the mindset of retirement, you really helped us get into what are some of the healthy approaches, what are some of the ways that we can learn from older generations, and we can prepare younger generations to have that purposeful and meaningful path forward. Before I let you go, though, I have one last question for you. And what's your favorite thing about your Gen Z peers? I know you spend a lot of time with older counterparts, but what is your favorite thing about your Gen Z peers?
I think that the most fascinating thing to me is that we're very hardworking, but also willing to fail. This has been something fascinating that I have noticed among a lot of my friends is that I think that a lot of us are very ambitious and are willing to take risks that maybe older generations weren't as willing to do. And I think maybe that's just because we're young now and we have many years ahead of us for many of us. But I have really embraced the fact that a lot of my friends are doing startups, or a lot of my friends are pivoting careers entirely for better or for worse, whether it's as a result of a layoff or not. But I think that a lot of my peers are very willing that if they're at a job for a year and they don't like it, they're not staying there for 10, 20 years, like a lot of the people that I speak with who are in their 80s who say, I kind of regret that I didn't switch. Or people saying, I don't like working for a boss. I'm going to be my own boss. So yeah, just that sense of not being constrained, I think has been one of the fascinating elements of just interactions that I've had with my generation.
I think what I hear from that is Gen Z is willing to do what feels right for them at the time it feels right. And some people would say, oh my goodness, that's so selfish. They just need to suck it up and work for 20 years. And I was like, I think that you want people to be miserable because you were miserable, right? And that's not going to do us any good. So when I look at that and what I hear from you is this is a generation of people that aren't willing to sacrifice what they value, what they want to get out of life. And it's not really anybody else's business. So I see that in them too. Well, Noah, I know that there is so much we could talk about and that you are continually putting out great work to help other people learn about this kind of trend with these older adults. If people want to follow along and stay up to date with your work, where can we send them?
So I am very active on LinkedIn. I post most of my stories. My author page is available on Business Insider, at Noah Sheidlower. And yeah, I would say those two. I'm also on Twitter/X, if I'm not as active there.
Wonderful. We'll make sure to include those in the show notes. And Noah, it was fantastic to spend time with you like this. And it was great to learn with you.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me on.
What I love about the Workforce Agility Limited series by Cornerstone was we talked to executives and customers all about skills. Skills, 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 skills. Cornerstone has a wonderful background in learning and development, training, etc. Their LMS is world class, but they've centered the business now, not just on that, like building upon that, but building upon how everything is moved to the skills economy. So check out the limited series called Workforce Agility, and you can get it wherever you get your podcast. And it's just a wonderful series where we talk to their executives on the shift of why, and also their customers that are using it. So check it out whenever you get a chance. Appreciate it.
What an incredible conversation with Noah. If you're anything like me, which I'm just going to assume that you are, you're probably walking away with a notebook full of ideas. So let's pull out a few of those big takeaways that really stuck with me and what we can be doing to apply those to our own life. First, retirement's no longer one size fits all. Noah's reporting shows that more and more people are redefining what it means to retire. For some, it's slowing down but staying engaged in meaningful work. For others, it's about never stepping away at all. But the takeaway here, we don't have to lock ourselves into a timeline someone else made or that made sense for other generations. Build a version of work and life that works best for you. Second, purpose fuels longevity. From Trader Joe's employees who are moonlighting as comedians to construction workers in their 80s, Noah found that having a reason to show up each day, whether for social connection, creativity, or financial stability, keeps people active and mentally sharp. It's a reminder to find something in your own life that gives you the same sense of purpose at any age. 3, let's plan for the future, but live for now. A common regret among older workers is waiting until retirement age, whatever that means, to enjoy life. Trips go untaken, family time is missed, and health changes make certain dreams harder to chase. Noah's advice from their stories is to save and plan, yes, but don't delay joy for someday that might not be guaranteed. 4, Gen Z is getting ahead on the financial literacy. Noah pointed out that younger generations today have more resources, tools, and conversations around money than ever before. From 401k contributions to side hustles to investing apps, the key is to start small, but start now, even if that's just $20 from a paycheck. And don't worry, we're going to dive into the financial part of retirement soon. And 5, there's no perfect timeline. One of Noah's biggest lessons is let go of the pressure to hit life milestones by a certain age. The people he's met who are the happiest in their 80s didn't necessarily follow a straight path, and many who hit their goals earlier in life found themselves wanting more. If you want to keep up with Noah's reporting and dive into his work further, you can connect with him on LinkedIn, check out his Business Insider author page, and you can find him on Twitter/X. All of those will be linked in the show notes so you can follow along. As always, thank you for tuning in. If something in this episode stuck with you, we'd love to hear about it. If you're tuning in on Spotify, share about it in the listener comment section. But you can also follow, rate, and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help other people find the show and learn along with us in these conversations. If you want to share your thoughts directly, you can always use the form on my website, meganmgrace.com/podcast, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram at meganmgrace. And thank you to the Gen Z team behind the scenes who bring this to life. This episode was produced by Callie Waters and edited by Leah Kramer. Thank you again for stopping by. Let's continue this conversation, and we'll chat soon.